Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Some of you have asked me if I can give an update on what's been happening in gene therapies for limb girdle muscular dystrophy in particular, as well as more generally. And there have been a few things happening, not as much as I personally or people in general might have hoped. A lot of that has been due to COVID, which has caused the medical centers doing clinical trials to prioritize collecting data on what they're already working on, but sort of steering them away from trying to start any new trials until things kind of get a little more settled and under control. So there is right now some new data to share on the clinical trial for gene therapy in limb girdle muscular dystrophy 2E/R4, as well as a couple of announcements by actually two different companies who are intending to start a clinical trial of gene therapy for LGMD 2I/R9, which both will hopefully begin in early next year, 2022. There's also been some safety concerns for gene therapy, which I've alluded to in a previous video, and I wanted to give an update on that, as well as some data, what's been happening in a recent Duchenne muscular dystrophy clinical trial, which I don't think ultimately is bad news, although everyone seems to have taken it that way. But it sort of is helpful to illustrate some of the pitfalls and in clinical trials that things can get complicated. Just that's the nature of them. As well as to go over some of the safety concerns and the FDA's thoughts about that from a regulatory perspective. But when looking over that, I decided that really that should be a separate video. So in this video, I'm just going to go over what's been happening in the one ongoing trial and the two recently announced future trials of gene therapy for limb girdle muscular dystrophies, and then I'm going to go over the other part in a separate video. So this shows some of the most recent results that Sarepta has released from the LGMD 2E gene therapy trial. And this was from a presentation at the World Muscle Society, in this case, virtual Congress in light of COVID, which happened in late September 2021. In other words, a couple of months before this video is being recorded. And this compares the values on a sort of level scale which gives a person's level of function called the NSAD. And here 0 on the scale is the place where people started off at the beginning, and so this scale, if they go up over time, that means that they're gaining function. If they go down over time, that means that they're losing function. So the purple line is the people in the trial, and the gold line is, so this trial doesn't have a placebo group, but there is a natural history study of LGMD2E going on concurrently. And so this is taking people in the natural history study who have kind of similar age, gender, level of function as the people in the trial and sort of comparing the trajectories over 2 years. And as you can see, so this scale goes from 0 to 50. A higher number means a person has more function. And the people who received the therapy, both at the 1-year point and 2-year point, gained between 4 and 5 points on this scale. And the people who were in the natural history study, didn't receive the treatment, lost about 4.5 points over that same period. So a little bit of details about the way this trial is organized. So there's 2 treatment groups, each of which has 3 people in it. So the second group was treated later than the first group and was given 4 times the dose of the gene therapy drug. And as you might expect, it kind of made sense. Cohort 2 has more protein expression. However, the sort of average for the 12-month data for the 2 groups was actually very similar. There were sort of 5 different measures that they took, one of which was the NSAD that I showed you in the last slide. Cohort 2 did better on 2 of them. Cohort 1 did better on 2 of them. And on the other one, the 2 were exactly the same. Okay, so the other thing is cohort 1, their NSAD scores were stable from 12 months to 24 months, and there was actually an intermediate time point, and that score was the same as at 12-month and 24 months for all 3 of the people. Now for cohort 2, it hasn't been 2 years since they've all been treated yet. That's going to occur early next year, 2022. So we don't have 24-month functional data, and the graph that I showed you earlier includes both groups for the 12-month functional data, but only the cohort 1 for the 24-month data. Now, unfortunately, one of the participants in cohort 2 died in an accident which had nothing to do with the trial or safety or anything else. It turns out actually that that person in the early tests before their death actually had the strongest response to the drug. So that's very tragic for the person, and as well as having one less data point in the trial. So that's kind of a summary of the latest results for the Sarepta LGMD 2E/R4 clinical trial. So what Sarepta has said in their recent statements going forward with the 2E trial is that they plan to have the next step be to finalize the way that they're going to produce the AAV plus beta-sarcoglycan DNA vector that they're going to submit to for approval that's going to be sold commercially. That's actually a big issue in gene therapy trials in general, because typically when you do a small trial, you're making the vector in small amounts, but you need to convince the FDA that the vector that you used in the initial clinical trials is functionally the same as what you're actually going to be selling, so that the patients that take the therapy after it's approved are getting the same thing as what was tested in the clinical trial. So Sarepta has recently made that changeover in their DMD clinical trials. They're doing they did a couple clinical trials with the pre-commercial formulation of the vector, and now they're doing some with what they plan to submit for approval. So that's what they've said is the next step, and then when that's done, they plan to go forward with subsequent clinical trials for 2ER4 and probably with other sarcoglycanopathies as well, although they haven't released details of exactly how that's going to be done or the timeline. Okay, now there have been a couple of announcements from two different companies who are both planning to do clinical trials on gene therapy for LGMD 2I/R9. And that's actually the form that has the non-gene therapy trial also going on that I talked about in a recent video, giving people the compound ribitol. But now we've got two gene therapy trials which are planned to hopefully start in early 22. That's what the press releases from both companies said. So one of them is by a company called Atamayo, which is a spin-off from Genethon, which is is in France. It's kind of a government commercial partnership to develop advanced medical treatments. And they submitted a application for a clinical trial which would happen in 3 European countries, UK, Denmark, and France. Then AskBio, which is a company based in North Carolina that was purchased not too long ago by Bayer, has applied to the FDA with an investigational new drug application, which is what you have to do for the FDA to start a clinical trial in a new drug. They did that this past year, and both of them say that they want to start dosing the first patient in the first half of this coming year. Okay, so a little bit about FKRP. It actually is a pretty easy gene to do gene therapy on. It's fairly small, so it can easily fit in a single AAV. It also, LGMD2I/R9 does affect the heart, so you would want the gene that you're delivering to be expressed in both skeletal and cardiac muscle. So, I don't think the people have announced what promoter they're going to use, but it's almost certainly going to be one that will express the gene in both the heart as well as skeletal muscles. And both of these things are very similar to beta-sarcoglycan, which is the gene for the 2E trial. It also needs to be expressed in both cardiac and skeletal muscle, and it's also very small, so it can fit into a single AAV. Okay, so that's a rundown of where we are currently with clinical trials, and hopefully there will be a couple starting out within 6 or 8 months from now. So thank you for watching, and wishing you all a good day. Thank you.